At 5 a.m. in Woodlands, the rumble of thousands of suitcases rolling across the border pierces the night as people silently leave in search of survival. In global financial news in 2026, this island nation proudly maintains its top position, the world's most expensive city for enjoying a luxurious life. But try to look away from the dazzling mirrored glass of Marina Bay Sands and squeeze into the suffocating crowds at Raffles Place Station at dawn. Place your hand on the cold metal handrails on the train, and you'll immediately feel the stifling heat emanating from an overloaded urban machine. That's where the harsh reality is laid bare. 60% of the workforce is being exploited just to maintain their positions, while their real income has silently evaporated by 0.4% annually. The people don't feel the country is getting poorer. They found themselves slowly suffocating in that very absolute prosperity. We're not here to discuss superficial predictions of collapse. We must ask a more ruthless investigative question about the nature of development. Why did a perfectly planned, precisely operated, and exceptionally secure empire in Asia ultimately force the very people who built it to flee from its gilded cage? When speaking of Singapore, the world often proudly bows its head in admiration of the great miracle of its HDB, Housing Development Board, system. From an island with no natural resources and no domestic market, the state has created a top-tier financial center reigning supreme in the heart of Asia. That miracle once operated on an extremely clear, unwritten social contract. People placed their complete trust in the meritocracy, believing absolutely that as long as they worked hard and obeyed the rules, they would surely have a home. That model of public housing once served as a beacon for the entire world, ensuring that anyone could own a home. Try touching the sturdy concrete walls of the early HDB blocks at Toa Payoh, then look up at the stark contrast with the opulent glass financial towers at Raffles Place. You will understand the profound pride of previous generations, their strict adherence to rules, and their sweat truly earned them a share of national ownership, creating a solid foundation for the future. But that absolute glory seems to have become a story of the past. That great foundation wasn't destroyed from the outside, it's silently cracking from within due to its very superiority. When a growth machine is designed and optimized so perfectly to attract massive global capital flows, we are forced to ask a morally alarming question. What happens when that machine of prosperity begins to turn against us, draining and exhausting the very lifeblood that faithfully operated it? Entering 2026, the nominal salaries of Singaporean professionals remain a coveted symbol on Asian economic rankings. But behind those glamorous figures lies a ruthless financial machine. As geopolitical conflicts push energy inflation to its peak, people's real purchasing power plummets and incomes nearly stagnate. The bitter paradox is laid bare at the dinner table. A simple meal here now costs 3 times as much as in Bangkok. Try holding a $7,300 salary statement for a professional. A huge sum in theory. Then, swipe your credit card through the automated teller machines for recurring rent deductions, escalating utility bills, and essential living expenses. You'll witness firsthand how much of your hard-earned money evaporates instantly in a few cold seconds as debt is crossed out. This exorbitant cost is by no means accidental, but rooted in the spatially compressed structure of the island. Land scarcity forces fierce competition for infrastructure, and its positioning as a global city has transformed its service ecosystem into a fortress welcoming only billions of dollars and the ultra-wealthy. Standing beneath the suffocating concrete blocks of Shenton Way, you'll realize a harsh reality. You're using your fixed local salary to bid directly against massive international capital inflows from around the world for living space. we are forced to pause and question the nature of prosperity. If a top-tier regional salary is barely enough to cover basic necessities, are people truly living or merely working for their own survival? When a nation decides to transform its entire living space into a museum of international luxury, is it implicitly signing a death warrant for the very middle class that poured its energy into building it? The biggest and most dangerous crack in this growth engine lies precisely at the foundation of its ultimate pride: the HDB, Housing Development Board system. Entering 2026, the transfer price of HDB apartments had skyrocketed by 5.6% in just 1 year. This stark figure instantly transformed the island nation into the third most expensive place in the world for real estate. The bitter paradox is exposed. Singapore boasts the highest rate of homeownership globally, yet it also has the highest rate of massive debt in the world. The HDB system, originally designed to guarantee the right to housing, has become a cold, speculative financial instrument, where generations are caught in a decades-long cycle of debt. Stand still before the HDB Hub's online portal, staring intently at the endlessly long mortgage loan spreadsheet. Even if you're a highly skilled professional earning an enviable $7,300, you'll still find yourself frozen in place, powerless, at the doorstep of your intended apartment. Your hard work seems perpetually unable to keep pace with the skyrocketing price of land per square meter, completely eliminating even the most basic leisure activities from your monthly budget just to maintain the title of homeowner. You'll find your entire 30 years of youth officially imprisoned, enslaved by 4 cold concrete walls. This real estate structure is tearing apart the unspoken social contract of the past. When the pressures of debt force countless young couples to relinquish their parental rights, not because they don't love children, but because they don't want their children to continue fueling this human resource grinding machine, we are compelled to question the very nature of prosperity. Does a house truly remain a home? Or has it transformed into a gilded financial shackles binding people's destinies? When the right to a place to live becomes a privilege that stifles the vitality of the entire middle class, where will the soul of a city ultimately drift to? When the burden of real estate debt no longer makes the workplace a peaceful haven, the entire office environment immediately reveals its true nature as a relentless, human resource-crushing machine. Singapore has always prided itself on being one of the world's most productive nations. But behind that radiant display of productivity, a shocking figure is set to be revealed in 2026. 61% of its workforce is experiencing complete burnout. Even more worrying, Generation Z, the core force carrying the enthusiasm of the future, leads the burnout list with a staggering 68%. The obsession with kiasu culture, the extreme fear of being left behind, has propelled an entire society into a frantic marathon with no finish line. Try stepping off at Raffles Place Station at midnight, sitting next to people dozing off on the cold waiting benches, staring at the blue light emanating from the laptops still open on their laps, and touching the employee ID badge bearing the prestigious corporation's logo pinned to their chests. You sense the profound loneliness and emptiness of these exceptionally skilled individuals. You are forced to run at maximum speed every day just to avoid falling behind, trapped in a colossal economic machine that seems to have completely forgotten to press the pause button. The bitter paradox lies within the system. This very exhaustion is causing a massive loss equivalent to 79.1 working days per year for each employee due to decreased productivity. When people are seen merely as statistics in a GDP growth chart, it's no surprise that only 56% of employees feel respected, the lowest in the entire Asia-Pacific region. This explains why 41% of workers are willing to quit their jobs just to reclaim their right to breathe. We are forced to question the ethical limits of this machine. Are we working to live, or are we living only to meet year-end performance ratings? Is the ultimate value of a human being measured solely by the numbers they contribute to the budget? When people are exhausted both physically and mentally after 12 hours of work each day, they often yearn for shared spaces and cherished cultural memories to find solace. But what will happen next if even the familiar street corners that hold the soul of the city are being leveled to make way for soulless concrete structures? The collapse of urban identity is rarely announced with jarring pronouncements. Instead, it spreads silently through the disappearance of shared spaces, where old values are flattened to make way for soulless concrete blocks. While giant shopping malls sprout up like mushrooms with air conditioning running at full capacity, historic markets dating back to the 1930s, such as the Sungai Road Thieves Market, have been completely wiped out. Street food culture, a source of pride once recognized by UNESCO, is dying on this very land. Data shows that the average age of street food artisans has now reached 60. Long-standing culinary icons like Casso and Lim's Fried Oyster have been forced to surrender and close permanently between 2025 and 2026. The structural reason is extremely cruel. Their profits are being squeezed by 10% simply because of skyrocketing electricity and raw material costs. Listen to the rusty iron bolts of a long-standing antique shop being forced to relocate due to unsustainable rent. Sit at the cold metal tables in the hawker centers, once considered community living rooms, filled with the warmth of human interaction, now transforming into soulless industrial canteens. Stare at each bowl of noodles or each seat, now coldly priced in cash. You'll realize that the younger generation refuses to inherit the legacy, not because they've turned their backs on heritage, but because they bitterly understand that pure passion can never afford the most expensive cost of living on the planet. Cultural heritage today seems to be nothing more than a flashy but empty marketing product, artificially packaged to attract tourists. The harsh consequence is that this island nation is becoming a cleaner, but also blander and soulless version of any other city on the map. That feeling of soul loss is no longer an abstract concept, but a genuine longing and anguish in the hearts of those who once loved this place. We are forced to confront a cruel philosophical question. Can a nation buy absolute modernity with money, but can it buy back memories? When all historical values are discarded to make way for soulless concrete structures, are we witnessing the rise of a museum of luxury? A place where everything is perfect to look at, but completely devoid of the warmth of life? The suffocating atmosphere of this golden cage doesn't just stem from financial debt. It arises from an atmosphere that is heating up both literally and figuratively. This island nation was initially envisioned as a tropical paradise, but extreme urbanization seems to be forcing nature to pay its dues. 2025 saw an average temperature of 28.1 degrees Celsius, and by early 2026, scorching days reaching 35 degrees Celsius have become the new normal. The urban heat island effect transforms towering concrete structures and asphalt roads into giant radiators, trapping people in a thick, oppressive atmosphere. The data reveals a high price for this splendor. For every 1 degree Celsius increase, the risk of heat stroke for outdoor workers here skyrockets by more than 250%. Try stepping out onto the scorching asphalt sidewalk on a 2026 afternoon, feeling the thick air suffocating your breath. But the intense heat from the sun is perhaps nothing compared to the icy chill emanating from the electronic gazes. Singapore has always been steadfast in its moniker, the City of Fines. And now that management system has been upgraded to a new level by artificial intelligence. Looking up at the thousands of AI cameras scrutinizing every public act, you'll see that personal freedom seems stifled under the guise of absolute security. Especially with the new flight bans implemented from the beginning of 2026, turning the island nation into a fortress, where entering and exiting sometimes feels more like an interrogation than a movement. You have no choice but to retreat into closed, air-conditioned rooms, inadvertently isolating yourself and exacerbating the energy crisis that's burning your wallet. As many as 74% of residents expressed deep fear that their privacy would be violated. We are forced to elevate this phenomenon to a philosophical question of existence. Does absolute security truly matter when we lose our privacy, our right to make mistakes, or simply our right to breathe in unquantified natural air? When the extreme heat of the weather fully resonates with the suffocating atmosphere of a restrictive control system, human patience officially reaches its ultimate limit. They don't protest with loud words. They choose to silently pack their bags and book one-way tickets. But when millions of people decide to silently step out of the gilded cage, where will the map of that escape lead them? When the pressure inside the gilded cage reached an unbearable level, people didn't choose to resist with loud words. They chose silence and departure. A massive exodus is underway right under our noses, continuing a suffocating series of events. The first and busiest escape route is the Woodlands checkpoint leading directly to Johor Bahru, Malaysia. The data shows this is no longer simply a weekend shopping trip. Many Singaporean families are deciding to settle permanently in Johor to enjoy a cost of living up to 55% lower. For them, Malaysia represents an immediate financial relief from the burden of high living costs. When the RTS railway officially opens at the end of 2026, this wave of evacuation is predicted to explode even more intensely. Sit down at a casual eatery in Johor, order a steaming bowl of noodles or pho, and look at the bill. It's only a third of what you'd pay in Singapore. Hold the keys to a spacious house you just rented or bought on this side of the border, but the actual cost was paid for by the exhausting labor on the other side of the strait. You'll bitterly realize a forced life arbitrage. You earn money in strong Singapore dollars, but are forced to spend it and seek breathing space in a neighboring country just to avoid the heavy burden of living costs. We must pause to examine this phenomenon from a structural perspective. When an international transport bridge no longer simply serves transportation, but becomes a forced financial escape route for the middle class, what does that reveal about the sustainability of the gilded cage? If life for Singaporeans only becomes easier when they venture outside the country, then who is ultimately benefiting from the glory and splendor that reigns over this island nation? The silent exodus isn't limited to the middle class seeking a release of pressure across the Johor Bahru border. The core talent pool, the intellectual elite and high-level professionals, is also decisively packing up. Their destination is the emerging empires of the Gulf region, such as Dubai and Riyadh. There, they find enormous, completely tax-free salaries and an increasingly open living environment. With the income gap between Riyadh and Dubai narrowing to just 5 to 8%, the elite face incredibly attractive alternatives instead of clinging to a Singapore that is gradually losing its appeal. Simultaneously, another shocking statistic emerges. 41% of the workforce is choosing to quit to find balance, and the majority are opting to leave. Millennials and Gen Z are heading to Bangkok to become digital nomads, where the cost of living is only half, but the urban vibrancy is far superior. In 2025, Bangkok became the world's most visited city with over 30 million tourists, while Singapore risks becoming isolated and deserted within its own perfect order. Stand beneath the giant electronic display at Changi Airport, gazing up at the constantly changing numbers of departure announcements. Hold in your hand a one-way plane ticket leaving the island nation, or place your laptop on a sun-drenched desk in Bangkok. Stare at the Gulf employment contract that grants you absolute financial freedom, completely freeing you from the heavy burden of HDB debt weighing on your shoulders. You will understand a profound shift in perspective. Leaving is no longer a betrayal of your homeland, but a cold, calculated decision to reclaim the right to breathe. You resolutely step out of the suffocating gilded cage to seek a space where you can truly live, not just exist to compete. We are witnessing the rise of new tax havens and more dynamic economic centers, putting an end to Singapore's unchallenged dominance. When the brightest minds and passionate young hearts resolutely choose to leave, what will ultimately remain of a nation? Empty skyscrapers or soulless growth indicators? We are forced to ask, is this macro shift a cowardly flight or a courageous journey to reclaim the right to live? Can a state continue to cling to the soul of its nation solely through high salaries? Or is this silent exodus forcing the system to confront the limits of a performance-driven model? Indeed you are. Faced with a silent exodus and a deep rift in the social contract, Singapore's governing apparatus was far from idle. In April 2026, a massive $1 billion emergency relief package was launched to cool down energy prices that were burning people's wallets. Over 1 million households received $500 CDC vouchers earlier than expected, and an estimated 2.4 million more were expected to receive additional cash assistance by the end of the year. However, from a structural analysis perspective, these dazzling billions of dollars were essentially temporary painkillers. They might help people pay some electricity bills in the short term, but they were completely powerless to mend the shattered belief in a sustainable housing dream, or to save a cultural identity teetering on the brink of collapse. Place those flimsy $500 CDC vouchers on the table, nestled beside a thick stack of 30-year mortgage bills and electricity bills escalating with each barrel of world oil. Gently scratch the silver foil off these short-term support vouchers, and you'll fully grasp the utter helplessness of a superficial solution. You bitterly realize that a few $100s in cash, a perpetual handout, cannot buy back the 12 hours you're squeezed dry in the office. Nor can it restore your right to have children without fear that they will grow up to be the next fuel for the growth engine. We are forced to confront the decay of a system. The Singapore Incorporated model, where a nation is run coldly and optimized like a corporation, has officially reached the ultimate limit of human endurance. Fierce competition from Dubai or Riyadh is not the root cause. They are merely catalysts exposing the weariness of a system so obsessed with performance KPIs that it has forgotten the concept of happiness. When a nation views its citizens merely as links in a chain, as tools to fuel growth indicators, what happens when the people resolutely refuse to be assets to that machine? Is the future of this island sliding into a museum of extravagance? A place overflowing with magnificent, gilded architecture, but completely devoid of genuine inhabitants? Indeed, the Q1 2026 GDP growth report recorded a negative 0.3%, a chilling warning that exposes the reality of this economic machine running at overcapacity. As night falls, the island still stands proudly, its skyscrapers towering, reflecting the splendor of a nation that reports growth figures with absolute precision. But if life cannot be made easier, then the dazzling lights of Marina Bay will ultimately only leave behind the cold, soulless emptiness of glass and concrete. The future of this island nation no longer lies in trying to raise more skyscrapers or attract more billionaires, but in whether the governing apparatus dares to undergo a radical overhaul of its thinking, shifting from soulless GDP figures to the human value of the ability to live. Try pressing your ear against the gleaming, mirror-like tempered glass of the skyscrapers. Listen carefully to the silent space behind that cold surface, and you'll almost hear the weary sighs of an entire generation echoing. Watch the subway trains roll by at dawn, where families quietly emerge from their gilded cages to seek a new horizon where they can truly live, not just exist as cogs in the economic machine. Place your hand on your chest in this suffocating urban space, and you realize the old social contract, trading freedom and high living costs for stability, has officially expired. The story of Singapore in 2026 is not just a crack in the life of an island nation, but a costly warning to any social model that prioritizes efficiency over people. We bitterly recognize a universal truth. Prosperity without happiness and identity is ultimately a very expensive illusion. If forced to choose for your own life, a safe, comfortable life under constant surveillance and suffocating pressure, or a more precarious life with more freedom and financial ease, which path would you choose? Can a city continue to be called a paradise if the very people who built it no longer find a reason to stay? If you find yourself resonating with today's story, or would like to join us in further uncovering the harsh realities behind the urban glamour, please leave your thoughts in the comments. Please note, the content in this video is based on estimated figures, social surveys, and economic analysis up to 2026. The viewpoints presented are of a systemic and social phenomenon analysis nature and are not intended to target any specific individual or organization. The information is for reference only and reflects a multifaceted perspective on the current state of modern urban development.